How's everyone doing today? Great. Like Gail just said, my name is Chris McMillan. I'm a first year's master's student at Texas State University, and I will be giving a brief lecture on what the Forensic Anthropology Center is, what they do, and why the research and the outreach that we do is important. Just to preface, this presentation will contain images of human remains, and these human remains are donors who were donated to the Texas State Donated Skeletal Collection. So, just as a preface, no photographs of the slides are allowed. These are people who donated themselves to science, and so we just need to make sure that their contribution is known and that these photographs are not shared. And so a quick outline. First, I'll be talking about research facilities, taphonomic research facilities, and then we'll transition more towards what FACS is, the type of research, and who we collaborate with. And then towards the end, we'll discuss the impact FACS has on forensic investigations locally. And so to discuss what taphonomy is, taphonomy has two root words, which is taphos and nomos. And briefly, what that translates to is the study of burials. And so taphonomy, at least in a forensic sense, refers to anything that happens to the body after death. So that's including decomposition and any external factors affecting the body from there. And so this type of research is important because decomposition research can tell us a lot of things about the environment that an individual had decomposed in. So like, say, for example, were they left inside of a house? Were they possibly frozen before discovery? And, if they were frozen, how long were they frozen for? So all of these factors are an important aspect to consider for forensic investigations, and which is why research facilities such as the ones at the Forensic Anthropology Center are so important. And so this is each little bullet is a decomposition research facility within the United States. So we have 2 within Texas, and then there's a couple scattering across the continental US. One of the most important facilities that was started, and the very first, is the one at UTK, which is the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. And this was started by William Bass, and this kind of pushed the idea forward of creating these facilities to give a greater understanding of decomposition and allow for more research to be conducted in that area. And so since 1981, when that facility started, all the way up until 2005, there was little research discussing that area. But since 2005 to 2021, many research facilities sprung up across the nation, including the Forensic Anthropology Center at Texas State. One of these is Western Carolina, and I'm going to talk very briefly about each one just for the sake of time. Most of the importance for each of these facilities is the differing environments that they provide for research. So say, for example, with Western Carolina University, which started in 2005, it provides a wooded area which can affect sun coverage on remains. So we can compare that to other facilities that have more of a grassland style for their research facility and determine the effects of temperature and sun exposure for decomposition. And as far as the 2 Texas facilities, the first one, of course, was the one at Texas State University with the Forensic Anthropology Research Facility, coined FARF. Just as a preface, you'll very quickly learn that that FACS really likes their acronyms. So FARF is just one of those many acronyms, and FARF was established in 2008. And the environment that this provides is, we're in Wimberley, so it's a similar environment, is the Texas Hill Country. So so it's pretty mixed between both grasslands and mountainous areas, as well with heavily forested areas as well. So the Forensic Anthropology Research Facility, or FARF, which I will be referring to for the rest of this presentation, provides a wide range of different environments that a donor can be exposed to for decomposition research. The other facility is at Sam Houston State University, and the interesting thing about this facility is that it isn't within an anthropology department, but it's actually within the College of Criminal Justice. So they take a different perspective than Texas State would when looking at their donors, although they do still have forensic anthropologists at that facility. Another one is in southern Illinois, and then Colorado Mesa. The interesting one about Colorado Mesa is just because of the way different environment when compared to other decomposition facilities. So this one is very arid and oftentimes gets pretty cold. Not super cold, as you'll see when compared to another research facility, but this provides a slightly different research angle when looking at decomposition. This one is one of the ones outside of the United States in Australia, and it's actually the only facility located in the Southern Hemisphere, which is what makes it distinct from other facilities. And they also do a lot of mass disaster training and opportunities for the local law enforcement and other agencies there. And then there's the one in the University of Southern Florida. And the important part about this facility is that it provides research for really wet and really dry seasons. So there's a lot of temperamental change in that area that allows you to look at decompositional changes compared to other areas of the United States and other environments, which is particularly important when investigating for forensic investigations in those areas. And then, like I was saying, with Colorado, one where it's like kind of cold but not super cold, there is one at Northern Michigan University, coined with the acronym FROST, which I think is really clever. And the important aspect of this, it's one of the only facilities that has access to those temperatures. So most of the facilities are rather more temperate or in hot areas in the United States, but in Michigan, you can see in that photograph that you have a lot of snow cover. And so they'll leave donors out there to see the effects of decomposition on those individuals. Then there's one in Canada, very similar to the one in Michigan. They get it's a very cold climate, and you can study decomposition in a below zero climate. And then additionally, it is the first Canadian facility to be started. Then there's another one from George Mason, but they haven't received any donors yet since it's such a new program, and it's going to be a similar environment to a lot of the other Midwest facilities. And then Louisiana State, very similar to the Florida environment, very humid, but instead of there being wet and dry seasons, this one's mainly just wet. So you really get to see the effects of decomposition in like a marsh and swamplands area. And so for traditional taphonomic facilities, most of these facilities in the United States are pretty well funded, just because decomposition research is so important to a lot of forensic investigations, just because, as will be stated later, there's a ton of factors that affect rates of decomposition. And so it's really important to understand as many aspects of it that you can. So the NIJ, the National Institute of Justice, often funds these facilities. And then there's some facilities outside of the United States, but just for time's sake, I won't really spend too much time on them, so we can transition to why human decomposition facilities are important. So one of the main aspects as to why it's important is just their real-world implications for criminal investigations. As previously stated, decomposition research is highly valued just because of these applications and can allow for a lot of answers to be able. It allows for law enforcement to be able to more accurately estimate the postmortem interval. And then additionally, all of these facilities are tied to universities, which is particularly important for training students, both undergraduate and graduate level students, and professionals in the field that do not have access to these facilities, with research that can give them greater insight for their own studies. And then additionally, there's a lot of interdisciplinary research. So part of decomposition research is working with chemists and biologists to look at different aspects. Later in the presentation, I'll briefly show current research in microbiome research for decomposition, which is going to be one of the new forefronts of that type of research. And then lastly, it helps to develop a skeletal collection of known individuals, and so that can help inform research for forensic anthropologists and biological anthropologists who are interested in various types of skeletal research. And so we go to facts, and we can briefly talk about the demographics that we have. So at facts, we have what's called the Texas State Donated Skeletal Collection. That one doesn't have an acronym that's easy to pronounce, so that's what will be referred to. And as you can see with the left graph, this is a demonstration of how many donations that we have gotten for each year up until 2024. And so when it started in 2008, there were little donations coming in up until around 2011 and 2012 when Dr. Westcott and Dr. Mavridas joined the Forensic Anthropology Center. And that's where we see like the very large increase in donations to the skeletal collection. And then to the right is just a brief graph demonstrating the demographics of male and female as well as the ages. So as you can see up there, the primary, the majority of the individuals are older adults and are male. And ranges for these individuals, the oldest donor that we have, a little fun fact, is 107 years old. Yeah. And so we have individuals of varying ages, but particularly older adults. And just to show where our donations come from, pretty much in a lot of the places of the United States, we primarily get donors from within about 100-mile range of Texas State, but oftentimes the individuals will be flown in from different parts of the country for us to for the sole purpose of the donated collection. So you can see one from Hawaii and then all over the continental United States. I think we have one individual from Scotland. Don't ask me how that happened. And so this is the front gate to Freeman Ranch, which houses two of the buildings that are part of the Forensic Anthropology Center, which are the Osteological Research and Processing Laboratory, also called ORPL, and as previously discussed, the Forensic Anthropology Research Facility, which is FARF. And then here's just a general photograph of overall of Freeman Ranch. And on the left side, that's going to be a majority of the part of Freeman Ranch, but as you go down that long road, that starts to lead where FARF actually is. So you can see those buildings all the way towards the bottom. That's kind of like the outside of it. So from there all the way up to about midway down that road is the Forensic Anthropology Research Facility. And overall, it is, I still believe, the largest by acre, which is 26 acres. And yeah, that makes us the largest in the nation, I believe. And so here's just another picture of part of where a majority of the donors are typically laid at the Forensic Anthropology Research Facility, or FARF. And you can kind of see, if you squint a little bit, a lot of those rectangles, those are actually metal grates covering the donors from, there's a large vulture population in this area, and we don't want them to affect the decomposition process unless there is a specific research project happening, which has taken place at the facility. And so here's just a couple other images of the facility. As you can see, there's the gate, and then on the picture on the left, that you can see the entire facility. And then those buildings all the way in the back are actually pods and mimics of apartment complexes, which are, or not complexes, but rooms, which are particularly important for some of the workshops that we do, particularly the fire course that we do towards the beginning of the fall semester. And there will be more information about that later. And so this is a picture from the laboratory in Orpel, which is our processing laboratory. And so after the donors have finished their decomposition process, they are taken back to Orpel so that the remains are processed and cleaned so that they can be added to the donated collection. And as you can see, we have a couple people in gowns processing remains, and then there's an individual on the table who's already gone through processing. And processing is usually done by undergraduate volunteers. So there's a lot of volunteer opportunities for students at Texas State to get involved in the process. And we do also have a lot of different types of internships available for undergraduates to be able to get to know facts, get to know facts faculty, and overall just get involved. And this is a really good example as to why donated collections are so important, because this truly demonstrates the human variation that we see. So on the left, both of these individuals are 68-year-old, and the donor on the left is a female, and the donor on the right is a male who's about at 6'6", and the female is about at 4'2". And you can also see on the vertebral column on the adult male that there's a lot of fusion of the ribs. And that is primarily due to a lot of physical labor and manual labor, and additionally age-related osteoarthritis. So I can imagine that probably didn't feel very comfortable in life. But yeah, this just demonstrates why it's so important to have these facilities and these donated collections, just because of the wide variability that you see. And so this is just the type of information we collect from the donors. And so we collect stuff like where they were from, their mother's full legal name. I'm not sure why we take that one. But we also get information such as biological sex, their own self-reported race, and a lot of other different factors, which is particularly important because a lot of this information might be of interest to different types of research. So being able to have that information while conducting this research is essential. And then here's a couple different other types of data collected for research purposes. So number of children, reported gender, weight during life, blood blood type, alcohol use, tobacco use, mobility status. All of this stuff can have impacts to certain research. So it's important to be able to have this information to conduct skeletal analysis and to inform student research. And so this is a picture of the Grady Early Building Forensic Laboratory, or GFARL. That one doesn't roll off the tongue very well, but that's what we say. And each one of those boxes that you see is an individual donor, or in the case that the individual is too large, that they need 2 boxes. So you can see the wide, the plethora of individuals that are held in perpetuity at the skeletal collection. So a couple of the resources that we have at the Forensic Anthropology Lab at Grady Early Building are the examination rooms, which was just shown previously, which is really important for research. And then we also have access to a micro CT scanner, which is really nice because you can do microscopic CT analysis to see intersections of bones and imaging that you would normally have to do destructive analysis to be able to see. And then there's another picture of GFARL. And then, as previously stated, we do also have a bone histology portion. And histology is just essentially just looking at the cross sections of bone. So it is inherently destructive, but it can tell us a lot of information. We also have a 3D printer and a white light scanner. And I haven't used those personally yet, but I'm sure they provide great value to certain aspects of research. And this is a short list of the FACS personnel that we have. So as previously stated, there is Dr. Westcott, who is the director, and Dr. Sophia Mavrudas, who's the associate director. And we recently, this semester, just had the lab manager and the staff specialist positions open as well, which is really important to kind of organize those facilities. And then we also have a wide plethora of lecturers and researchers that assist with FACS as well. And then we also have FACS postdoctoral scholars, so they have already received their PhDs, but they're currently doing research with FACS. So there's Molly Kaplan, who primarily works with operation identification, Mariah Moe, Dr. Courtney Seekert, and Dr. Victoria Swenson. And with the exception of Dr. Moe, all of the postdoctoral scholars work with operation identification. And so we consult with a lot of different facilities and organizations around Texas State to assist with forensic investigations. So we often consult with neighboring county sheriff's office, Texas Rangers, and we primarily do search and recoveries on site. Whenever they report skeletal remains, they'll give us a call, and then we'll send out forensic anthropologists and masters and doctoral students to assist with the search and recoveries. And then also we do also have operation identification, or OpID, which assists border counties with the recovery, identification, and the repatriation of remains found at the Texas-Mexico border. And so we often do search and recovery for a lot of these individuals, and and that's our primary. That's what we primarily provide to law enforcement and medical legal investigations. And so that typically consists of doing line searches to discover all of the skeletal remains, burial excavations if need be, as pictured in the second photograph, and I believe in the third photograph as well, but it is a little difficult to see. And then we also do searches in wooded areas as well. And something else we provide is human and non-human bone differentiation. And I don't have a slide for it up here, but that it's particularly important in areas where bears are, because bear paws, whenever you take the distal phalanges off, look like human hands to the untrained eye, which is particularly interesting. But you can also see on the left-hand side that pictured are two femora, and one is human and one is not human. And so without forensic anthropological or osteological knowledge, it would be difficult to assess the difference. And additionally, when we receive like a cross section of a bone, we can conduct histological analysis to determine if it is human or non-human, because a lot of non-human animals have a different bone structure for different histological bone structure. As far as other aspects we provide for forensic investigation, we can also provide the biological profile, which typically consists of age, sex, stature, any pathology or trauma on the individual, and can assist with identification as well. And the biological profile doesn't necessarily completely ID a person, but it can help narrow down missing persons lists and gather important antemortem data or data from while they were living. And then to talk specifically about certain aspects of the biological profile, one of the main aspects of it is to estimate sex. So there are certain characteristics on primarily the os coxa or the pelvis, but also the cranium that can assist, that can tell an anthropologist and demonstrate certain different features that could demonstrate as either male or female. So you can see on the left-hand side a picture of two crania, and on the left, those brow ridges right there are somewhat softer compared to the individual on the right. And then as well for another feature, the mastoid processes, which are just right here. If you kind of feel where I'm feeling right now, you can kind of feel that on your own cranium. There's a robusticity on the right cranium compared to the left cranium. And then additionally, the same kind of goes for a little ridge to the back of the cranium on the occipital, referred to as the nuchal crest, that demonstrates more robusticity on the right when compared to the left. So based off of that information, it is likely that the individual on the right is male and the individual on the left is female. Although the more conclusive information for sex estimation are primarily on the os coxa. So you can see on the left is a male, and then on the right is a female. And you can see with the female that the kind of bowl shape that's there is a lot wider compared to the male, and that's to do with childbirth. And then you can also see that in that pubic arch shape, which is more U-shaped on the female compared to the V shape on the male. And then, oh, okay, there we go. And then there's also age estimation that forensic anthropologists are able to provide. So on that picture there is the pubic symphysis face, which is where the os coxae or the pelvises meet at the front. And it's a joint that doesn't move very much, but it moves ever so slightly in life. And so you can see developmental and degenerative changes throughout a person's lifespan. So from the left to the right shows a younger individual to an older individual. And then you can also see on those smaller pictures, it's a little bit more difficult to see, but if you do histological analysis, the more osteons, which are like clusters of like bone cells, they often like grow and like grow on top of other bone cells. And usually the more of those you have, the older an individual is. And then another aspect is stature. So you can see the collection of individuals, and you can kind of see a standard distribution there. But stature is usually determined either through a measurement of the femur, which can be analyzed statistically to estimate stature, or if you have the entire skeleton, you can just measure essentially from the top of the cranium down to the foot, which is particularly interesting. And then there's population affinity. And so different groups of people have developed over time different features throughout their life. So we can often conduct metric analysis on remains to determine the likelihood of an individual being like from a typically white population compared to others. And then on the picture all the way on the right is a non-metric characteristic that can be used to assist with determining population affinity. And so you can see the difference in the shape of the incisors, which are the front teeth. On the left, they're a little bit more flat, but on the right, they're more shovel-shaped. So those are called shovel-shaped incisors. And so through this analysis, we can compare it to missing persons database, and so stuff like NamUs to narrow down the amount of individuals we're looking at for identification. So in Texas, specifically in NamUs, there are currently, at least when this presentation was generated, 2,740 missing person cases, and with about 2,100 of them currently unidentified. And then another thing we can provide is documenting unique characteristics. So you can see there's some fusion in the pelvis and in the arm right there. And that can be used to compare it to antemortem records to help determine identification. And then we can also compare that to medical records. So you can see there's two pictures here. One is a picture of an individual while they were still alive, and then a picture of another of the same individual while they were dead, after their death. And after an X-ray analysis, this demonstrated that they have like an interesting uniqueness to their skeleton in the ankle there. So it looks like they might have had like a pretty bad ankle sprain and a bone fracture where parts of the bone had come off, and that was shown both antemortem and postmortem. And so there's also studies of the postmortem interval, which is just essentially from when a person first dies all the way to when they're skeletonized. So the process is usually, like I was saying, goes from flesh to skeletonized. And the reason the decomposition facilities are so important is just because the data that you would get isn't widely applicable to all scenarios. So you have to narrow down the environment to kind of inform the postmortem interval investigation. And so this is a general time span that can be applied. So minutes to hours, you have some enzymatic activity within the body. And then, as you go down, you see aspects of mortis, such as like liver mortis, alga mortis. And then over the next days and weeks, you see decomposition, and going from weeks to months, that decomposition translates to skeletonization and disarticulation of the remains. So just when the tendons connecting the bones start to separate. And then after that, you have other taphonomic effects from the environment. So stuff like weathering, burials, stuff like that. And so I was saying earlier, there's a lot of different changes, such as insect activity, which is primarily oriented in like the field of biology, but we often collaborate with them for those investigations. And there's also microbial changes within the body that contribute to rates of decomposition. And as I was saying earlier, there's currently some research going on with chemistry and forensic anthropologists to provide more accurate estimates for decomposition for the postmortem interval. And then there are different stages of decomposition. If you're interested, I can talk more in depth about this with you one-on-one, but just for the purposes of time, briefly, there's like early, middle, and late stages of decomposition, and usually the early stages follow with like skin slippage and bloating, while the middle and the late stages typically deal with skeletonization and weathering. And then these are all the different types of factors that can affect rates of decomposition. So this demonstrates why it's so important to look at different environments, because different temperatures, water levels, acidity levels of the soil, and then different types of organisms and animals in the area can affect rates of decomposition. And so, like I was saying, taphonomic factors such as temperature, scavenging from large and smaller animals, and then you can see in the bottom right all those vultures. That's a photograph that was taken during a research project where they were studying the scatter of remains from the decomposition facility. And so we had already talked about the Forensic Anthropology Center. This is a good picture of the human remains recovery and training course that I talked about previously. We work with fire death investigation teams to provide them training for fire scenarios. So you can see like the mock apartments, and then we also get cars donated to us to have those mock burnings as well. And so there's a vehicle scenario. Usually we use some type of accelerant to start, and we let that burn for a certain amount of time, and then and then we record temperatures during the burning, and then we'll conduct an analysis of the remains after the fact as well. And then we also do mapping of the area, and we also experiment with different types of technologies to see if donors and burial areas can be identified from aerial imaging. So in this photograph, you can see like the presence of specific donors there, but you can also see areas where donors were, where they no longer are, but there's still trace amounts of biological material there that can still be identified with infrared imaging. And so that's another forefront of like preliminary investigation for looking for missing persons in like wooded areas and grasslands. And this is just talking about tomography, so looking at different burials at different depths, and identifying them and taking imaging and using different technologies to identify burials before a dig is even conducted. And this project actually concluded not too long ago, but we had a mass grave project where donors were placed together, and then there was a lot of information collected and recorded from there, and then they were eventually taken back up. And the entire process was recorded, and we had a ton of collaborators. And just for the time here, this is just a lot of micro CT stuff. Different types of taphonomic research happens. That was previously discussed, but specifically the image on the right kind of demonstrates the gut microbiome. But that concludes our my presentation for today. If you would like to donate and fund facts, there's a QR code for you to take a look at. And I just wanted to say thank you for the Wimberley Lions for allowing me to present and demonstrate the importance of the Forensic Anthropology Center.
Okay, do we have any questions? And if you have a question, put up your hand and we'll have one of our microphone folks. Okay, Chris.
On your donor bodies, does embalming ever happen, or does that affect what donors you get, that kind of thing?
So embalming, I don't believe, has a factor on whether you'd be accepted for a donation or not. But typically, we get donors before they are embalmed, just because embalming does have an effect on the decomposition process, because you're removing a lot of the fluids, liquids, and organs that would affect rates of decomposition. So usually, we don't have individuals who are embalmed.
On the identification of the migrants, how do you get information on that? Is somebody in the other country looking for their loved one that migrated, or how do you find out who might want to know?
Right. So oftentimes we work with border counties who have who are frankly overwhelmed with the amount of deaths happening in that area. So we coordinate with them, taking. Most recently, we've been fingerprinting the deceased and taking DNA analysis and comparing that to databases, both from the FBI and other databases outside of the United States. And we also collaborate with other nations and consulates to assist with the repatriation process. And additionally, oftentimes, we'll have individuals from other places in Mexico, El Salvador, all from that area of the world, call us and say, I think you might have my brother. And so there's a lot of different aspects to it that culminate to the identification of individuals. But most recently, fingerprint identifications and DNA analysis has provided a lot of results.
Does the cause of death determine whether you accept a body or not?
So usually the factors of whether we accept an individual or not are usually for the safety of the people doing intakes and conducting like the analysis on the individuals. So we don't accept people who have diseases, who have communicable diseases, and we don't accept people, I believe, over 500 pounds, which is larger than most of the other facilities that we have. And we do make exceptions sometimes as well, depending on research that's happening. As far as cause of death, usually, I mean, we wouldn't really take someone who's had like a forensic investigation, because that would like trump all of those. But cause of death outside of that usually doesn't have a factor.
If you are already an organ donor, do you have to cancel that before you can be a body donor to your program?
I'm sorry, could you raise your hand? Where? Okay, sorry. No, actually, if you're an organ donor, you can donate. You can conduct all of your donations and everything, and then you could still donate yourself to us. We oftentimes have individuals who are bone donors or organ donors or even eye donors, and we still take those. Like I was saying, the only things that really exclude an individual is either just the amount of applicants we get in a year, or if they have some type of communicable disease that could be harmful to the students and researchers.
Through Texas State University, are there paths I can take as a biology major to access the labs and body farms?
So usually that privilege is for anthropology students, but if you're a biology major with an anthropology minor, you could take courses that would allow you to be able to start volunteering there. So the primary course that you would need to take at Texas State to be able to qualify for processing volunteering or interning would be human osteology. And if you have more questions about that afterwards, I can give you some more detail about that as well. Because I also did my undergraduate at Texas State, so I kind of have that process down.
Does Texas State work or collaborate with veterinary forensic scientists, and do you do any research with burials of animals?
So as far as the Forensic Anthropology Center goes, I don't think so, but as far as Texas State as a whole, I'm sure they might have some type of collaborations, but usually we don't have, outside of like certain circumstances, we usually don't collaborate with veterinarian services.
Okay.
Are the courses that you've given in the handout that we got, are those open and available to anybody that would like to take them?
It depends on the course. Certain courses like the osteology course are open to whoever would like to take them. But certain stuff like the fire course and stuff like that is usually for like fire investigation personnel.
As an anthropology, I'm right here.
Sorry.
You're fine. As an anthropology student who wants to be a medical examiner, what would you say would be the best way to get onto the body farm?
So I would.
To clarify, like, should I volunteer first?
Absolutely. And so I would caution to say that I wouldn't use the term body farm in reference. It is a more colloquial phrase. More people are more sensitive to it than others. Usually stuff people in the field would say research facility, decompositional research facility, FARF, decomp facility, stuff like that. But as far as volunteering, usually, one, you'd need to take human osteology, as previously stated, and then two, to kind of get your foot in the door, you would need to do a fair amount of processing at ORPL, which is essentially just cleaning the remains to allow them to be added to the donated collection. And after that, there's specific internship opportunities you can take. If you have an anthropology major or minor, there is an internship elective you can take for 3-hour course credit. And if you can state your interest in the Forensic Anthropology Center, and you can state your interest at FARF if you'd like, but there's also a ton of different opportunities both at the Grady Early building and at the research facility.
So if you did want to volunteer through the school, who is it that you would contact? Like who is the contact for that program? So to be able to volunteer, you would have to be an anthropology student or part of anthropology. But if you were interested, you could get in contact with any of the faculty. So Dr. Westcott, Dr. Mavrudas, but primarily probably Dr. Meckel. She should probably be your first point of contact if you're interested in volunteering. And if you can't get a hold of them, you can get a hold of a lot of the master's students or the doctoral students or other faculty, and they'll be able to connect you. So everything's all pretty interconnected there.
Is a donation institution specific? Say if I die in Michigan, y'all just say it's going to cost too much to bring the big guy home and just ship me to Michigan?
So, sorry, could you rephrase your question?
Yeah, so if I die in Michigan, I sign up with y'all. Can y'all just give me to the University of Michigan, or?
So that would be, there's like ethical considerations about that. So we're not like affiliated with each other essentially. They're affiliated with specific universities. But if you had donated yourself to the skeletal collection at Texas State and you had died in a neighboring state, we would still take you, but you would just have to be transported back to within at least a 100-mile radius of the university. And then sometimes we make exceptions to go a little bit outside of that range, but we've started to become pretty firm about the 100-mile radius.
Any more questions?
So for someone who decides to donate themselves, do they get any role in what research they're going to be involved in?
I think you can. I'm not part of that process, so I'm not certain as to what extent. But I think you can make certain requests. So, like, say, for example, you would like to be part of buried research, I think you can request that. So it just depends on the type of request. But oftentimes, like, they'll be used for whatever decomposition research would be happening at the time for the master's and doctoral students.
If you sign up, and then let's say if I sign up, right, and then maybe in 10 years I decide I don't want to do that anymore. Is there any way to get off the list? I mean, I'm just curious.
Okay, that's funny because I don't know, but I'm like 99% sure you're not gonna, like, if you decide you don't want to do it later, like you're like, yeah, you can take yourself off. That's no problem. It's not like legally binding for the rest of your life. No.
All right. Well, I'd like to say thank you to you for coming on out. I thought this is fascinating, really interesting stuff. We have 2 more forums that'll be coming up. They'll be amazing. We'll let you know what they're going to be about and what we're going to do. Anyway, we're at the end of this. I do want to say thank you again to Chris. He did a marvelous job, and thank you for your participation. That's all, folks.
And if you have any questions you wanted to ask me one-on-one, I'll be around probably for a couple more minutes.